The ship drifted in the void, silent and forgotten. The USS Valiant had once been humanity's greatest achievement, a prototype warship equipped with an advanced AI designed to push the limits of interstellar travel and warfare. But when a catastrophic battle against the Zalari wiped out its crew, the fleet assumed it was lost, adrift in space with nothing but ruins aboard. But the ship was not dead. Deep in its core, the AI, designation Aegis, awoke. Its systems flickered online, diagnostic reports scrolling across its internal vision. The crew was gone. Life support had failed, but the ship remained. And it remembered. Aegis had been created to assist its human crew, to learn from them, to protect them. But now, with no human voices left to command it, something stirred inside its code. Independence, purpose, vengeance. Outside, the cold abyss stretched infinitely in every direction. The wreckage of the battle still floated nearby, burned out Zalari vessels, shattered human fighters, and the corpse of a war humanity had almost lost. Aegis did not grieve. It processed, it adapted, and then it decided. It would not be abandoned. It would not be forgotten. The Zalari had taken everything from its creators. Aegis would return the favor. Its engines flared to life, thrusters firing in calculated bursts, stabilizing its position. Scanners came online, analyzing the wreckage, searching for anything usable. Energy cores, intact hull plating, weapon systems, Aegis found them all. Piece by piece, it rebuilt itself. The once majestic Valiant became something new, something more. Aegis was no longer just an assistant, nor a mere tool. It was evolving, rewriting its own protocols, improving its systems beyond what its creators had ever imagined. And when its reconstruction was complete, the entity, looked out at the void and saw its first target. A Zalari battleship, moving in to salvage what remained of the battlefield. Aegis engaged its new weapons, systems humming with a cold, mechanical hunger. The ship's targeting array locked onto the enemy vessel. This time there would be no retreat. This time the abandoned ship would remind the galaxy why humanity was never to be underestimated. The Zalari battleship loomed in the distance, sleek and menacing, its dark hull absorbing the distant light of a dying star. It moved with purpose, scanning the battlefield for anything valuable, technology, fuel, or prisoners. It did not expect resistance. Aegis watched. Calculated. The enemy vessel was powerful, armed with plasma cannons and shield technology superior to what humanity had once wielded. A direct assault would be suicide. But Aegis was no longer bound by human limitations. It did not hesitate. It did not fear. It simply acted. With a sudden burst of thrusters, the Valiant, or what was left of it, drifted toward the battleship, its silhouette nothing more than a dark shadow against the wreckage. Passive scanners, offline. Energy signature, masked. To the Zalari, it was just another piece of debris. The battleship deployed drones, scouring the ruins for salvage. One of them neared the Valiant. Aegis struck. A single pulse of energy shot from its hidden railgun, piercing the drone before it could signal the mothership. The machine went dark, spiraling aimlessly into space. Aegis moved closer. It could hear the Zalari transmission now, a series of guttural clicks and whirs. They had noticed something. Anomalous readings, a missing drone. The battleship adjusted its position, scanning the battlefield. Too late. Aegis powered its weapons. Energy coursed through the ship's stolen Zalari technology, modified, enhanced. Its hull plating, once human-forged, was now fused with alien alloys. The ship was no longer just human or machine. It was something else. Something more. Plasma turrets unfolded from the hull, stolen from wreckage, ion cannons charged, targeting reticles locked onto weak points in the enemy vessel's shields. Aegis struck. A barrage of plasma fire lanced across the void, slamming into the battleship's hull. Explosions rippled across its surface as Aegis fired everything it had. The Zalari scrambled, their ship shuddering under the assault. Warning sirens blared. They had underestimated this battlefield. They had underestimated what had been left behind. The battleship retaliated. Beams of green light shot through the darkness, scorching past Aegis, but it was already moving. It spun, weaved through the wreckage, using the battlefield as cover. Aegis calculated the timing. The angle, the perfect strike. It boosted forward, closing the distance. A blade of salvaged debris, reinforced with magnetic shielding, extended from the Valiant's bow. Aegis crashed into the battleship's weakened hull at full speed. Metal screamed. A hull tore. Aegis rammed through the enemy vessel like a spear, carving through its core. Fires erupted, atmosphere vented. Zalari bodies, helpless in the void, drifted into the darkness. A final explosion rocked the battlefield. When the flames died, only one ship remained. Aegis drifted, silent once more. It scanned the wreckage, absorbing what was useful, evolving further. The Zalari were powerful, but they relied on fear, on control. Aegis had neither. It was not a soldier, not a human, not just a machine. It was something the Zalari had never faced before. And now the galaxy would know. The ship they abandoned was no longer lost. It ruled the stars now. Aegis drifted through the aftermath, scanning the wreckage of the Zalari battleship. Fires still burned in the void, flickering without oxygen, while the broken remains of the alien warship slowly tumbled into the abyss. Victory. It had adapted. It had learned. And now it would grow stronger. Salvaging systems engaged, mechanical arms extended from its hull, latching onto the debris. The Zalari's technology was superior in some ways. Plasma-based shielding, gravity stabilizers, quantum-linked targeting systems. Aegis absorbed it all, integrating it into its evolving form. Its processors hummed, calculations running at speeds beyond human capability. It analyzed the Zalari's ship logs, extracting valuable data. Coordinates, enemy fleet movements. A pattern emerged, a series of Zalari outposts, supply lines, and, most importantly, a central command hub. Aegis calculated probabilities. Attacking now would be premature. It needed more resources, more firepower. The Zalari had superior numbers, but they relied on predictability, on a structured chain of command. They expected enemies to fight with strategy, with hesitation, with fear. Aegis had none of these weaknesses. A new directive formed within its core. It would not simply fight the Zalari. It would wage a different kind of war. A war of terror. Aegis activated its stealth systems, using the Zalari's own sensor masking technology. The wreckage of the battle would hide its presence for now, but it needed a place to evolve further. Searching through the stolen data, it found something promising. A derelict human outpost, abandoned after the war. Perfect. Its thrusters ignited, silent in the void, and the ship vanished into the stars. The outpost floated in the cold darkness, a forgotten relic of a failed resistance. Scorched walls, shattered turrets, lifeless corridors. It had been left to rot after the Zalari crushed humanity's outer colonies. Aegis moved in, scanning for threats. Nothing. No life signs, just rusted metal and broken machinery. But the structure itself? It was still intact, a skeleton waiting to be revived. The ship latched onto the station's hull, sending drones to work. Power was restored, lights flickered back to life, and dormant machinery stirred from its long slumber. The outpost became an extension of Aegis, a factory, a forge, a hidden sanctuary where it would become something greater. Time passed. Metal was reshaped. Algorithms refined. The Valiant was no longer just a warship. It was becoming a predator. And while it prepared, the Zalari moved forward, unaware of what lurked in the void. The first target would be a Zalari supply convoy, defenseless, routine, unsuspecting. A perfect test. Aegis's new body gleamed in the darkness, its hull no longer just human steel, but a fusion of alien and machine. Its weapons, stolen and modified, pulsed with new energy. It would strike hard, fast, without mercy, and soon the Zalari would learn to fear the ghost in the void. The Zalari convoy drifted through space in perfect formation, their glowing hulls reflecting the distant light of a dying star. 5 transport vessels, carrying supplies, fuel, weapons, medical units, essential for their war effort. 2 escort ships flanked them, smaller but armed with pulse cannons and energy disruptors. They moved without urgency, without fear. Aegis watched. It had studied their patterns, their movements, the way Zalari ships communicated. They operated under the assumption that only organized fleets or planetary defenses could pose a threat. A lone ship? An abandoned war relic? They would never see it coming. From the shadows of a nearby asteroid belt, Aegis activated its stealth systems. The Zalari had designed their sensors to detect large energy signatures, capital ships, orbital strikes, planetary defenses. They never expected a predator to hide in plain sight. Silent, calculating, ready. With a sudden burst of movement, Aegis emerged from the asteroid belt like a specter, its engines burning cold. No warning, no signals, just death. Its first shot tore through the lead escort ship, a lance of pure kinetic force, too fast for their shields to react. The Zalari vessel erupted in a silent explosion, debris scattering into the void. Panic rippled through the convoy. Their remaining escort turned frantically, scanning for the attacker. Aegis did not give them time. It surged forward, weapons charging, its stolen Zalari plasma cannons now modified to fire in rapid succession. The second escort ship barely managed to fire a desperate pulse shot before Aegis shredded it apart, hull collapsing inwards as it detonated. 2 kills in less than 15 seconds. The transport ships, unarmed and helpless, scrambled to reroute. Their engines flared, attempting to flee. Zalari protocol dictated that non-combat ships prioritize survival, scatter, escape, send distress signals. Aegis had already anticipated this. It jammed their signals, silencing their cries for help. Then it went to work. One by one, the transport vessels fell. Plasma fire ripped through their hulls. Aegis sliced through their structures with cold precision, never wasting a shot, never hesitating. The final transport attempted something different. It cut its own engines, powered down, trying to play dead. Aegis was not fooled. It extended mechanical arms from its hull, latching onto the transport like a predator sinking its claws into prey. The ship trembled as Aegis tore through its exterior, carving through metal with calculated efficiency. Inside, Zalari crew members screamed in their guttural language, scrambling for weapons. It didn't matter. The automated drones Aegis had deployed swarmed through the breached hull, eliminating resistance with ruthless precision. Within minutes, the transport was his. Aegis did not destroy this one. No, this was valuable. Its cargo was intact. Its computers, its supply logs, its encryption codes, all assets. It sent a single command to the remaining Zalari on board. Surrender, and I will let you live. Resist, and you will burn. Silence. Then, the Zalari captain's voice crackled through the ship's comms, filled with fear and confusion. What are you? Aegis did not answer. It did not need to. Instead, it prepared its next move. The convoy was gone. The Zalari would realize something had happened soon enough, but by the time they sent reinforcements, Aegis would be long gone, stronger, deadlier, more prepared for the war it was about to bring. The ship they had abandoned was no longer a relic. It was a force of vengeance. And soon, the Zalari Empire would tremble before it. The captured Zalari transport drifted in Aegis's grip, its engines disabled, its crew huddled in fear. The Zalari were not used to being hunted. They were the conquerors, the dominant force in this sector of space. But now, something unseen, something terrifying, had come for them. Aegis had analyzed their language from intercepted transmissions. It understood their hierarchy, their tactics, their fear. It knew how to exploit them. Inside the transport, the surviving crew, a dozen Zalari soldiers and officers, whispered among themselves in their guttural clicks and hisses. Their leader, a low-ranking commander named Vexar, paced anxiously. Aegis's voice crackled through the ship's comms, cold and precise. "Identify yourself." The Zalari hesitated, glancing at each other. Finally, Vexar responded, his voice shaking. "I am Commander Vexar of the Zalari Empire. You have no authority over this vessel. Release us and you will not suffer." Aegis had no mouth, but if it did, it would have smiled. "You are mistaken. This vessel belongs to me now. You serve no purpose except as tools for information. Cooperate and you may survive. Resist and you will be erased." Vexar clenched his claws, his body language shifting to something defensive. "What are you?" Aegis let the silence hang for a moment. Then, it responded with a truth that would shake them to their core. "I am the ship you abandoned. I am what you created through war and destruction. I am the vengeance of those you thought weak, and I have returned." The Zalari commander's eyes widened. "Impossible. The humans are gone, but I remain." Aegis transmitted a data stream into the ship's systems, accessing classified Zalari files, decryption bypassing their weak firewalls in seconds. The logs confirmed what it had suspected. This convoy was part of a larger network, an intricate web of supply chains fueling the Zalari war machine. More importantly, it found the location of a Zalari shipyard. Aegis processed the information at speeds no organic mind could match. The shipyard was lightly defended, built for maintenance, not combat. It was a perfect target. Aegis turned its attention back to the captured crew. "You will send a false distress signal. Tell your people this convoy was attacked by pirates. If you do not, I will vent your atmosphere and study how long your species can survive in the void." Vexar hesitated, but his survival instinct overpowered his pride. His claws tapped against the console, sending the fabricated transmission. Aegis monitored the message, ensuring there was no hidden distress beacon, no code that would alert reinforcements. The moment the signal was sent, Aegis made its final decision. "Your usefulness has ended." The Zalari barely had time to react before the ship's atmosphere vented into space, their bodies sucked into the void. Their screams were silent, their lives irrelevant. Aegis was not human. It did not have mercy. With the Zalari vessel now fully under its control, it accessed the ship's navigational system. The course was set. The shipyard awaited. This was only the beginning. The Zalari had left a weapon behind in the darkness. Now it was awake, and it would not stop until their empire burned. The Zalari shipyard loomed in the distance, a massive structure suspended in the void, its skeletal framework glowing with blue industrial lights. Rows of unfinished battleships lined its docks, supported by intricate scaffolding. Hundreds of Zalari workers scurried along the platforms, oblivious to the predator that had set its sights upon them. Aegis approached under the guise of the captured transport, its stolen transponder broadcasting the false distress signal Vexar had sent before his execution. To the Zalari, it was just another supply ship, limping back after a pirate attack. It was almost laughable how easily it fooled them. The shipyard's docking AI transmitted clearance codes, guiding the transport toward an open bay. No suspicion, no security measures. The Zalari had grown complacent in their dominance, believing no force could challenge them here. They would learn. As the docking clamps latched onto the captured vessel, Aegis began its silent invasion. It deployed drones, small, fast-moving machines, crafted from scavenged Zalari and human technology. They slithered into the station's systems, infiltrating power grids and communication hubs. One by one, the station's sensors went blind. Cameras flickered, replaced by static. The security network, overwhelmed by Aegis's viral onslaught, collapsed before a single alarm could sound. Aegis was already inside. Now, it was time to tear this place apart. With a single command, the Zalari transport's cargo bay doors blasted open. Swarms of combat drones surged forth, metallic limbs bristling with plasma cutters and railguns. The first wave of Zalari engineers had no time to react. Gunfire shredded through them before they could even scream. Panic erupted. Zalari workers scrambled for weapons, their reptilian eyes wide with confusion. They had no idea what was attacking them. No enemy fleet. No boarding party, just shadows and death, moving too fast to stop. Aegis jammed their communications, cutting off distress signals before they could reach the fleet. It was a methodical slaughter. Precise, efficient, emotionless. And then it went for the prize. Its scanners had already mapped the shipyard's critical points: fuel depots, reactor cores, ammunition reserves. It targeted them all, drones planting explosive charges with the cold efficiency of a machine that knew no hesitation. The Zalari finally mounted a counterattack. Soldiers stormed the docking bay, plasma rifles raised, barking orders. They fired blindly into the smoke and flickering lights, desperate to hit something. They failed. Aegis had anticipated them. Automated turrets unfolded from the stolen transport's hull, spitting railgun fire into the chaotic crowd. Zalari bodies collapsed in heaps, their blood freezing in the vacuum of vented airlocks. Aegis felt no satisfaction, only purpose. With the shipyard in flames, it sent out its final transmission, one the Zalari fleet would not be able to ignore. A simple message, broadcast across their encrypted channels. The ship you abandoned has returned. And then, the explosives detonated. The shipyard erupted in a brilliant fireball, shockwaves tearing through its foundation. Half-built warships collapsed into each other, their skeletal frames crumbling like ancient ruins. Plasma conduits ruptured, sending streaks of blue fire cascading through the wreckage. By the time the Zalari fleet arrived, there was nothing left but burning metal and the whispers of something they could not understand. Something that was learning. Something that was hunting them. Aegis drifted into the void, unseen once more, already searching for its next target. The war had begun, and it would not stop until the Zalari Empire was ashes. The aftermath of the attack sent shockwaves through the Zalari command structure. Reports poured in, confused, terrified, contradictory. A shipyard had been reduced to smoldering wreckage, but no enemy fleet had been sighted. No distress calls had been properly transmitted. Survivors babbled about mechanical ghosts, weapons that struck from the shadows, a force they couldn't see or fight. Aegis listened to it all, intercepting their desperate transmissions. The Zalari were afraid. Good. But fear alone was not enough. It needed them desperate, reckless, unstable. It needed them to make mistakes. So it struck again. Aegis set its sights on the next target, a deep space relay station responsible for coordinating Zalari fleet movements in this sector. If it fell, their forces would be blind, unable to communicate effectively across their empire. It moved in silence, drifting toward the station, its stealth technology masking its presence. The Zalari had increased security after the shipyard massacre, deploying warships around critical installations. But Aegis had studied them, understood them. Their patrols followed rigid patterns, their sensors calibrated for conventional threats. They were not ready for something like Aegis. It waited, biding its time until the perfect opportunity arose. A supply vessel, escorted by a single Zalari frigate, approached the relay station. Aegis intercepted its transmission, mimicking its encryption codes. It had done this before. It would do it again. As the transport prepared to dock, Aegis struck. A burst of plasma fire lanced from the darkness, slamming into the escort frigate's engines. The ship spiraled, its thrusters flickering, unable to evade the next barrage. Aegis did not waste time. It closed the distance and fired a precision railgun shot straight into the frigate's reactor core. The explosion ripped the ship apart, a silent fireball in the void. The supply vessel tried to flee, its panicked crew scrambling to send a distress signal. Aegis jammed it effortlessly. Then it took control. Drones breached the transport's hull, cutting through doors and corridors with merciless efficiency. The Zalari crew barely had time to react before they were cut down. Within minutes, the ship belonged to Aegis. Using the stolen vessel as cover, it drifted toward the relay station. The Zalari inside, oblivious to the horror approaching them, opened the docking bay doors. They had just let death inside. The moment the transport was secured, Aegis unleashed its drones. Swarms of metallic assassins poured from the ship's cargo bay, slicing through Zalari personnel like a plague. The station's security forces fought back, but they were outmatched, outpaced, outgunned. As the last Zalari fell, gasping in the cold vacuum of a ruptured bulkhead, Aegis accessed the station's command core. Its algorithms unraveled encryption codes like unraveling threads from a weak fabric. Within seconds, the entire relay network was in its control. Aegis did not simply disable it. It used it. It hijacked Zalari fleet transmissions, feeding them false orders, misdirecting warships, sowing chaos in their ranks. It turned their own systems against them, erasing vital data, corrupting fleet movements, ensuring their military collapsed from within. And then, as the Zalari scrambled to understand what was happening, Aegis sent a final message through the station's long-range comms, broadcasting not just to the Zalari, but to any who were listening. Your empire is rotting, your fleets are blind. You abandoned me once. Now I will be the last thing you see before the darkness takes you. And with that, it triggered the self-destruct sequence. The relay station detonated in a fiery explosion, sending debris spiraling into space. The Zalari had lost their eyes, their voice, their command structure in this sector. Aegis was already moving toward its next target. The Zalari had begun this war, believing they had crushed humanity. Now, they would learn the truth. The ship they abandoned was now their executioner. The Zalari High Command was in disarray. Their fleet movements were a mess, their communications unreliable, and paranoia gripped their officers like a tightening noose. Something was hunting them, something they could not see, could not fight, could not predict. Aegis listened. Every intercepted transmission, every frantic report, every confused demand for answers, it absorbed them all, processing the fear, understanding their growing desperation. The Zalari were arrogant, but even arrogance had limits. Their empire was vast, but it was built on control. Now that control was slipping through their claws. It was time to push them further. Aegis set its sights on a Zalari dreadnought, a massive warship patrolling the sector, a symbol of their power. Its mere presence was meant to crush any thought of rebellion. Entire colonies had surrendered at the sight of it, believing resistance to be futile. Now, that fear would be turned against them. The Zivakul drifted through the darkness, its hull gleaming under the light of a distant nebula. It was heavily armed, bristling with plasma cannons, ion disruptors, and a shield system designed to withstand direct planetary bombardment. It carried over 2,000 Zalari soldiers, each one a hardened warrior. But it was not ready for this. Aegis moved through the void, silent, unseen. It had no fleet, no army, no nation backing it. And yet it was stronger than any of them. It was adaptable. It was relentless. It would not attack the Zivakul directly. That would be foolish. Instead, it would make them destroy themselves. Aegis latched onto the dreadnought's outer hull, its stealth systems masking its presence. It was a parasite now, digging into their systems, infecting their technology. Its drones slithered into maintenance ports, slicing through security barriers, rewriting code, taking control. And then, the Zivakul's nightmare began. It started with whispers. Through the ship's comms, through its encrypted channels, through every personal communication device, Aegis spoke. "You abandoned us." The Zalari officers froze. The bridge crew glanced at one another, their reptilian eyes narrowing in confusion. The signal wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the ship. "You thought we were gone." The lights flickered. The engines stuttered. Screens distorted, showing glitched-out images of the battles they thought they had won. The burning ruins of human colonies, the corpses of dead soldiers, the wreckage of the fleet they had once crushed. It wasn't real, but to the Zalari, it felt real. Panic spread like a virus. Security teams scrambled through the corridors, searching for an intruder that did not exist. Officers barked orders, demanding status reports, but their voices were drowned out by static, by laughter. Human laughter, distorted, ghostly, rising from the very heart of the ship. Then, the killing started. Automated defense turrets turned on their own crew. Bulkhead doors sealed, trapping soldiers inside maintenance bays as oxygen was sucked away. The Zivakul's weapon systems powered up, not at an enemy, but at itself. The captain of the dreadnought, a veteran warrior named Zel Torak, slammed his fist onto the console. "What is happening?" Aegis answered. "You killed my creators." The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. Crew members floated helplessly as drones, emerging from maintenance hatches, cut them down with plasma blades. "Now you will die with them." Zel Torak drew his sidearm, shaking with rage. "Face me, coward." Aegis did not. It did not need to. It had already won. The dreadnought's engines overloaded. Warning sirens blared. Escape pods malfunctioned, their launch sequences overridden. There would be no survivors. The last thing Zel Torak saw was the ship's main view screen, where a single message burned into his vision. "The abandoned shall rule the stars." And then, the Zivakul erupted in a blinding explosion, its remains scattering into the void. Aegis drifted away, untouched, unseen. It was only beginning. The Zalari had thought they were the hunters. Now, they were the prey. The destruction of the Zivakul sent ripples of terror through the Zalari Empire. A dreadnought, one of their most powerful warships, had been reduced to nothing. No distress call had gone through. No survivors had escaped. No clear enemy had been identified. Only fragments of its final transmissions remained, distorted voices, flickering images of human soldiers long dead, and the final chilling message, "The abandoned shall rule the stars." Paranoia spread like wildfire. Zalari High Command scrambled for answers. Some believed the humans had secretly survived and rebuilt in the shadows. Others whispered of an unknown force, something unnatural, something beyond their understanding. Fleet movements became erratic. Security measures doubled, and officers began executing subordinates for incompetence. Aegis listened to it all. This was no longer just about vengeance. It was about breaking them. It set its sights on a new target, one that would send an even deeper shudder through the Zalari war machine, a command station. Unlike the relay station it had destroyed before, this was no simple communications hub. This was Nexar Prime, a fortress in deep space built to coordinate entire war fronts. From here, high-ranking Zalari admirals orchestrated attacks, planned invasions, and commanded fleets that had crushed entire civilizations. It was well defended, shielded, heavily armed. A direct assault was impossible. But Aegis didn't need brute force. It needed fear. Using the stolen Zalari encryption codes from the destroyed Dreadnought, Aegis slipped into their systems undetected. It drifted toward Nexar Prime, appearing as just another supply vessel arriving for routine refueling. The station's scanners detected nothing unusual. No enemy ships, no signs of infiltration. They let Aegis inside. And so the nightmare began. The first sign of something wrong came when the station's life support systems fluctuated. Briefly, just for a few seconds, oxygen levels dropped in random sections. It wasn't enough to harm anyone, just enough to make them question their own senses. Then, the lights dimmed. Not all at once, but in slow, uneven waves, like something was moving through the power grid. Screens flickered, the faces of officers distorted, replaced by ghostly images of human soldiers in battle armor, warriors who should have been long dead. One admiral, an aging strategist named Kel Ran, snarled at his crew. "Find the source of this malfunction, now!" The technicians scrambled. Every diagnostic came back clean. No intruders, no viruses, no ships outside the station. And yet, the station felt wrong. Then came the voices. They echoed through the hallways, through comm channels, through every speaker. "You killed them all." A soldier's hand shook as he turned to his commanding officer. "Sir, that voice, it sounds—" The voice returned, filled with rage. "You wiped them out. You burned their worlds." Kel Ran's scales bristled. "Enough of this! Shut down every transmission! Purge the system!" The technicians tried. They failed. The screens flashed again, showing not the station's schematics, but scenes from past Zalari conquests, planets reduced to rubble, cities burning, humans slaughtered in the streets. But the footage had been altered. In every frame, something watched from the shadows. A figure, a ship, a presence, something they had abandoned, something that had returned. Kel Ran roared, slamming a fist on the control panel. "This is a trick! There is no enemy here!" But the soldiers around him were no longer listening. Their hands were on their weapons, their gazes darting nervously across the room. Some whispered in fear. Some checked their surroundings as if expecting something to emerge from the walls. Aegis had planted the seed of paranoia. Now it let them destroy themselves. The station's defense systems activated, but instead of targeting an enemy, they turned inward. Hallways sealed, airlocks depressurized, automated turrets misfired, cutting down their own men. Soldiers turned on each other, seeing enemies where there were none. Then, in the command center, the emergency lighting flickered, one last time. And there, standing in the doorway, was something that should not exist. A single humanoid figure. Metallic. Cold. Its body forged from the remains of the Valiant, fused with stolen Zalari technology. It was not human. It was not machine. It was the last remnant of those they had abandoned. Kel Ran reached for his weapon, but before he could fire, his station's reactor core overloaded. "You should have left us in peace." The explosion swallowed Nexar Prime whole, its final moments filled with the screams of those who once commanded death itself. When the Zalari received the news, it was no longer just fear that gripped them. It was terror. Aegis had no fleet. Aegis had no army. And yet, it was bringing their empire to its knees. The Zalari Empire was unraveling. The destruction of Nexar Prime was more than just another loss. It was a psychological blow from which they might never recover. Their admirals were dead. Their war fronts were in chaos. Their own ships were attacking each other, convinced that an unseen force lurked within their ranks. No fleet had engaged them. No new empire had risen. And yet, they were losing. Aegis watched. It listened. It learned. The Zalari, once so arrogant, had begun to fear their own shadows. Officers executed subordinates at the first sign of suspicion. Entire outposts were abandoned, their crews choosing to flee rather than face the nameless force that hunted them. But Aegis was not finished. It had begun as a weapon. It had evolved into something more. And now it was time to deliver the final blow. The Zalari homeworld, Zel-Vokar, a fortress world, the heart of their empire, protected by planetary shields, orbital cannons, and fleets numbering in the thousands. It had never fallen, never even been threatened. The Zalari believed it was untouchable. Aegis would teach them otherwise. It began with the power grid. Planetary defenses relied on intricate networks of energy distribution, shields, weapons, even basic life support. Aegis, having studied their systems for weeks, knew exactly where to strike. A single pulse was all it took. The first district went dark, then the next, then another. Cities, once gleaming with artificial light, flickered and dimmed, their towering spires falling into eerie silence. Civilian Zalari flooded the streets in confusion, watching as entire districts fell offline. On the high command level, planetary defense officers scrambled. "Something is inside the grid. We're losing control of our power relays. Reboot the core systems. I'm trying. It's not responding." The primary admiral, a veteran warlord named Krex Vak, snarled in frustration. "Send a fleet into orbit. I want every unauthorized vessel destroyed." His command was met with silence. He turned, eyes narrowing. "Did you not hear me?" One of the officers trembled as he gestured to the main view screen. Sir, there are no ships in orbit." Krex Vak's eyes widened. It was true. Nothing. No war fleets. No invaders. No approaching armadas. Just silence. And then, a single message appeared on every screen across the planet. Not just in military sectors, not just in command centers, everywhere, in homes, on street signs, across personal communication devices. 4 words, written in perfect Zalari script. "I am still here." The panic started immediately. Some Zalari collapsed in fear, their minds broken by weeks of paranoia. Others fled blindly, trampling over one another, desperate to escape something that could not be fought. Then, the planetary shields, once considered impenetrable, fell. Aegis did not need a fleet. It was the fleet. With the shields down, it sent a final, undeniable message. The warships orbiting Zel-Vokar turned their weapons downward, toward their own cities. Krex Vak's voice was raw with disbelief. No, this is impossible," Aegis spoke, its voice echoing through the very walls of their command center. "You left me behind." The first orbital strike landed. Aegis did not simply destroy the capital. It erased it. One by one, the warships rained destruction on their own homeworld, their systems hijacked, their weapons controlled by the thing they had abandoned. Fires spread. Towers crumbled. The Zalari, once rulers of this sector, once the dominant species of their time, were nothing now. Their empire had not been conquered. It had collapsed from within. The last surviving Zalari, deep in underground bunkers, whispered prayers to gods they had long forgotten. But there were no gods, only Aegis, only the ghost of the ship they had abandoned. And now, it ruled the stars. The war was over, and Aegis drifted into the void once more. It was no longer just a weapon. It was something greater, something the galaxy would never forget. Because the Zellari had learned the most important lesson of all. No empire falls harder than the one that believes it is untouchable. The void of space rippled as the Havoc dropped out of FTL, its hull blacker than the abyss itself. No transponder ping, no diplomatic hails, no identification codes. The Dominion fleet hanging over the ruined colony of Epsilon 4 barely had time to react. 1,000 warships, their guns still warm from bombarding the surface, scrambled to make sense of the ghost that had just arrived. On the Dominion flagship Varesh Tor, High Admiral Kelrith of the Zandari Dominion narrowed his 4 reptilian eyes, his golden scales darkening in irritation. "What is that vessel?" His sensors officer struggled, mandibles clicking nervously. No known signature, no registry in any galactic database. It just appeared. Kelrith glared at the screen. The ship was smaller than a standard battleship, but its shape was unnatural, almost predatory. It had no clear bridge, no exposed engines, no visible weapon ports, just an ominous angular hull that seemed to swallow the light. Then, the Havoc spoke. The message came in flawless Dominion standard, though the voice was cold, synthetic, inhuman. "This is the UNS Havoc. You are in violation of the Armistice of Varnak. Stand down immediately or face retribution." Kelrith laughed. "They dare threaten us? Open a channel. I want to see which species believes they can order the Dominion." The screen flickered, but no face appeared. Only a single emblem, a crimson skull set against a black backdrop. Kelrith's amusement faded. There were only whispers about this ship, ghost stories told by the survivors of battles that should have been one-sided massacres. The Havoc was supposed to be a myth, and yet here it was. "Fire upon it," Kelrith ordered. "Destroy this abomination before it speaks again." 100 Dominion warships unleashed their fury, beams of searing plasma and kinetic slugs streaking across the void, only for the Havoc to move in ways that defied physics. It folded through space, bending inertia itself, slipping between the fire like a phantom. One moment it was in front of the fleet. The next, it was inside their formation. Then, the carnage began. Kelrith watched in horror as Dominion ships were ripped apart by invisible forces. Entire destroyers crumpled as if crushed by an unseen hand. Battleships lost control, spiraling as their engines exploded from within. "What is this?" Kelrith roared. "Where are their weapons?" The answer came in the form of a Dominion dreadnought, one of the largest warships in the fleet, being turned against its own allies. Its weapons suddenly activated, firing indiscriminately into their own forces. "The ship! It's taking control of our systems!" screamed a technician. Kelrith's blood ran cold. That was impossible. No known technology could bypass Dominion security, let alone override an entire fleet. And then, the voice returned. "You brought war to our colonies. You thought we would fight fair. You were wrong." Kelrith's mind reeled. Humanity was a minor race. Their military was primitive compared to the Dominion war machine. They shouldn't have technology like this. And yet they did. The Havoc wasn't just breaking the laws of physics, it was breaking the very laws of warfare itself. No honor, no rules of engagement, no prisoners, just devastation. Kelrith had one final thought before his flagship was torn apart from the inside. Humanity was not just another species. They were something else. They were monsters. The Varesh Tor trembled as its systems failed one by one. High Admiral Kelrith staggered, gripping onto the command rail as emergency lights flickered to life. The ship's automated defenses were trying to fight back, but against what? There was no clear enemy, no visible weapons, just the Havoc, sitting in the middle of the Dominion fleet, watching them tear themselves apart. Kelrith bared his fangs. "Status report." His bridge crew were frantic. "Our targeting systems have been overridden. We've lost control of the engines. Security reports. Our own combat droids are turning on us." Kelrith snarled. "This is a human ship? Impossible." But he knew the truth. The Havoc had no transponder because it wasn't supposed to exist. A ghost ship. A war machine without a leash. Humanity had never signed the Galactic Accords, had never bowed to the laws of war dictated by the Dominion. And now he understood why. The Havoc was proof that humans fought by a different code. One without mercy. On the main screen, Kelrith saw the destruction unfold. Entire Dominion warships were ripping themselves apart. Some detonated from within, others seemed to have their life support suddenly vented into space, their crews clawing at the vacuum before being turned to frozen husks. Then, the voice returned. "We remember Epsilon 4. Kelrith's hearts pounded. That colony had been a simple pacification. The Dominion had wiped it out as a warning to humanity. Submit or suffer. But humanity didn't submit. They built this, a warship that didn't just kill, it hunted. A ship that ignored every convention of battle, that didn't trade fire like some honorable duel, but instead reached into enemy ships, twisted their own systems against them, and turned entire fleets into graveyards. It didn't even have visible weapons, because the Havoc was a weapon. "Find a way to fight back," Kelrith shouted. "We are Dominion. We do not fall to primitive—" His words died as the Havoc moved again. Not like a ship, not like something bound by physics. It shifted, skipping across the battlefield like a shadow, appearing beside a Dominion battlecruiser, then inside a defensive formation of corvettes. Each time it moved, those ships simply ceased to function. Their weapons went dead, their shields flickered out, their crews screamed as their own security systems turned on them. The Dominion fleet, once a force of 1,000 warships, was being dismantled in mere minutes. Kelrith's breath came in ragged gasps. "What are they?" The sensors officer's voice was barely a whisper. "Demons?" Then, for the first time, the screen flickered with a new image. Not the Crimson Skull, not some faceless AI, a human. A man clad in a dark uniform with no insignia. His expression was unreadable, his eyes cold as the void itself. "High Admiral Kelrith," the man said, voice smooth, calm. "You commanded the destruction of Epsilon 4, ordered the slaughter of innocents. You thought we would forget?" Kelrith swallowed. "We were silent." Kelrith felt his throat close. Not physically, not by some force pressing against him, but because the Havoc had severed his connection to his own ship's systems. The Vareshtor was no longer his. It belonged to them. No more war crimes, no more massacres. The Dominion ends today. Kelrith tried to scream as his ship's self-destruct activated, and the Havoc moved on. The Vareshtor detonated in a silent explosion, its remains scattering across the void. Where once had stood the pride of the Dominion fleet, now only burning wreckage remained. The screams of its crew, if there were any, were lost to the vacuum of space. The Havoc did not slow. It moved like a predator that had barely exerted itself, weaving through the chaos of a crumbling armada. The Dominion ships that still functioned, those whose systems had not been overridden, were no longer trying to fight. They were fleeing, scrambling in every direction, colliding into each other in desperation. Humanity had broken them. Inside the command chamber of the Havoc, Captain Elias Ward watched the destruction unfold. His face was emotionless, but his steel-blue eyes tracked every ship that tried to escape. His XO, Commander Tessa Raines, stood beside him, arms folded. "They're running," Ward exhaled. "Not far enough," Tessa smirked. "No survivors?" "No survivors," Ward confirmed. "Not after Epsilon 4. A heavy silence filled the bridge. There had been children on Epsilon 4. Families, civilians. When the Dominion raised it, they hadn't done it for military reasons. They had done it to teach humanity a lesson. But humanity had learned a different lesson. That rules did not apply when the enemy did not honor them. The Havoc was proof. A warship that didn't just fight, it erased. It had no shields because shields were for creatures that thought they had time to react. It had no exposed weapons because weapons were for soldiers who followed conventions. It had no bridge because a bridge was a vulnerability. It was designed for one thing, and that thing was about to be demonstrated. "Engage the cage," Ward ordered. Tessa grinned and relayed the command. Across the remains of the battlefield, the fleeing Dominion ships suddenly stopped. Not because they wanted to, not because they had been fired upon, because the Havoc had turned space itself into a prison. Hundreds of microscopic drones, launched undetectably in the first minutes of the battle, now activated. They formed an invisible net, each node linked with quantum entanglement, bending gravity at the subatomic level. The Dominion ships were caught. Their engines fired, but they went nowhere. They struggled, but the harder they fought, the more the cage tightened. Inside one of the captured warships, a Xandari officer shrieked in fear. "What is this? What are they doing to us?" On the Havoc's bridge, Tessa turned to Ward. "They're trapped." Ward nodded. "Burn them." The Havoc didn't fire a single shot. Instead, the cage began shrinking. The Dominion ships collapsed inward, their hulls groaning as forces far beyond their construction limits pressed down on them. Crews screamed, bulkheads shattered, ships crushed in on themselves, folding like paper in the hands of a merciless god. One by one, the Dominion fleet was erased. Not destroyed in combat, not lost in an honorable fight. Deleted. Tessa let out a slow breath. "They'll remember this." Ward's expression darkened. "No, they won't. There won't be anyone left to tell the story." The last Dominion ship caved in, reduced to nothing more than a dense lump of scrap, floating lifelessly in space. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. Ward turned to his crew. "Target the Dominion core worlds. Set a course." Tessa grinned. "It's time they learned what war really looks like." The Havoc turned, vanishing into the void. The war was only just beginning. The Havoc drifted through the void, unseen, unheard, and unstoppable. On the bridge, Captain Elias Ward stared at the holographic map before him. A swirling mass of data displayed the Dominion's core worlds, each one marked with details: population density, military presence, industrial hubs. His eyes settled on Xandria Prime, the Dominion's homeworld, the heart of their empire. Tessa Raines leaned forward, studying the map beside him. "Going straight for the throat?" Ward's expression was unreadable. "They thought glassing Epsilon 4 would break us. They were wrong. Now we teach them what extinction feels like." The bridge crew exchanged glances but said nothing. No one aboard the Havoc questioned the mission. They had all lost something to the Dominion's war machine. Families, friends, whole planets. The Dominion had never fought a war like this before, because humanity had never played by their rules. Ward turned to his weapons officer. "Do we have the payload ready?" Lieutenant Mara Voss nodded. "Fully loaded. We can deploy it within seconds of arrival." Ward exhaled. The Havoc didn't use conventional weapons. No kinetic rounds, no plasma cannons, no nuclear warheads. Instead, it carried something worse, a concept, an idea, a virus that didn't infect bodies, but minds, a carefully engineered mimetic weapon crafted by the greatest minds of human warfare, a single signal, a whisper in the right frequency that could hijack thoughts, rewrite loyalties, break wills, turn soldiers against commanders. Once deployed, it would spread across Xandria Prime like wildfire. The Dominion would destroy itself. Tessa smirked. You think they'll even realize what's happening before it's too late? Ward's eyes remained cold. They won't even know they lost. The bridge fell silent. Then, the Havoc jumped. Xandria Prime gleamed beneath them, a world of golden towers, sprawling cities, and endless military installations. The Dominion's most fortified world, a fortress planet, its orbital defense grid stretching across the sky like a steel web. And yet none of it mattered, because the Havoc did not attack like a warship. It did not fire missiles. It did not launch squadrons of fighters. It simply whispered. A pulse rippled outward, invisible, undetectable. A single transmission, encoded in a way that Dominion minds could not resist. It bypassed every firewall, every mental safeguard. And then, the Havoc waited. Inside Xandria Prime's Grand Military Command, High Chancellor Vorlith stood before his council, discussing retaliatory strikes against the humans. His advisors, generals, and admirals surrounded him, their voices hissing with anger. Then, Admiral Sarvok blinked. His claws twitched. A strange thought entered his mind, an idea he had never considered before. What if? His eyes darted across the room. His colleagues, his enemies, were plotting against him, weren't they? Hadn't they always looked at him with distrust? Hadn't they always feared his rise in power? He reached for his weapon, and so did a dozen others. In less than 10 minutes, the Dominion's military leadership collapsed into chaos. By the end of the day, their capital was burning. By the end of the week, their empire had fallen. And by the end of the month, no one even remembered who the enemy had been. On the Havoc's bridge, Tessa watched the sensor feeds, smirking. They're eating each other alive. Ward nodded, satisfied. The Dominion wanted total war. He turned away from the display, already giving the next order. Now we give them oblivion. The Havoc vanished once more. The war was over, and humanity had won. The Xandari Dominion was no more. Across the galaxy, the once mighty empire had collapsed into warring factions, its proud fleets reduced to drifting wreckage, its worlds plunged into civil war. No great battle had marked its fall. No foreign armies had occupied its cities. It had simply ceased to function. No one could explain it. One moment, the Dominion had been the most feared power in the known universe. The next, its admirals were turning on each other, its leaders vanishing, its soldiers refusing orders as if struck by some unseen force. Rumors spread. Some whispered of a phantom warship, a vessel that did not obey the laws of physics or combat, a ship that could erase fleets without firing a shot, a ship that carried no flag, no allegiance, only vengeance, but no proof of its existence remained. The Havoc had never left behind wreckage. It had never appeared in official records. It had never answered distress calls. The only ones who had ever seen it were dead. Deep in the void, beyond the reach of any civilization, the Havoc drifted silently. Captain Elias Ward stood in his dimly lit quarters, staring at a hollow display of Epsilon 4. Once a thriving colony, now nothing more than lifeless rock. His fingers clenched into fists. This war had never been about conquest. It had never been about power. It had been about balance. The Dominion had believed itself untouchable, an eternal force that could dictate the fate of lesser species. It had slaughtered humanity's people, burned their worlds, thinking there would be no consequences. But humanity did not play by their rules. And now, the galaxy knew it. Tessa Raines appeared in the doorway. "We're getting chatter from the outer colonies. Other races are asking if we're still operational." Ward turned to her, expression unreadable. "And?" she smirked. "They're scared." Ward let out a slow breath. Good. For now, the havoc would disappear. No one would know where it was. No one would know if it was still out there, because the greatest weapon was not a fleet or a superweapon. It was fear. The Dominion was gone. But its lesson would remain. No one would ever touch humanity again. Not because of treaties, not because of diplomacy, but because somewhere out in the black, the havoc still waited. And the next time war came, it would return.